time that Disney took a famous IP that was a resounding success back in its day and then made a merciless chop job of a remake that sucked all life and joy out of the story? I remember, because it happened only recently, when the studio released Peter Pan and Wendy. Look, I try to be fair to these remakes. I try not to be too clouded by nostalgia, and indeed I have defended them before. I don't think all of them suck. And in fact, I do think that a lot of them are actually quite good and do something different. But this one, it has to be among the worst that's ever been made, right? Like, ever in history. When they first announced it, I was a bit apprehensive, because the original Peter Pan, whilst nostalgic as all hell, is certainly a relic of its time. And under a modern lens, it is not looking good. It's extremely racist and sexist, making a mockery of Native American peoples, and also trying to reaffirm that the role of women is either as a maternal figure, or a carer, or as a love interest. And that's really all there is. It's not anything that would ever hold up to any sort of scrutiny in this day and age, much like many films from the early days of the company. And so I guess from that perspective, it was a prime candidate to be remade, and there's nothing wrong with having a fresh crack at it. You know, a fresh crack, but no racism and sexism. And so whilst I wasn't jumping for joy, I thought it probably did have the opportunity to set itself apart from the other remakes and make something fresh, something new. And then the trailer came out, and it looked garbage. And then I saw it, and surprise, surprise, it was indeed garbage. And I'd argue that it's probably even worse than the Disney Pinocchio remake that came out last year. At the very least, it's on par with that film. Because there are very few movies that I can finish watching and then be overcome with the feeling of complete and utter regret. Despair that I've wasted over an hour of my life on this thing. Time I'll never get back. Time that I spent watching this festering turd of a film. And if it seems like I'm being harsh, I promise you this thing deserves the hate. It is absolute trash tier quality. Nobody could possibly think this movie's acceptable. Or at least, that's what I thought. And then I took a quick peek at Rotten Tomatoes and depressingly, I discovered I was in fact wrong. There are people that think this is good, or at least that it's passable. This film, as of writing this, has a critical score of 67%, off almost 100 reviews. 100 professional film critics saw this film and thought, oh yeah, that's alright. Nah, mate, nah. Audience score, thank goodness. It puts this turd where it belongs, 20%. Lower than Pinocchio's 28%, I might add. And right now, perhaps you're sitting there thinking, oh, but you need to judge these things by a different criteria. It's a kid's film, all that sort of stuff. And I'll say this, and I'll say it once. No matter how low you bring down the bar, no matter how low you go, this thing still comes in under expectations. Because there really is just so much to hate, especially when you hold it up and compare it to the original. Okay, so let's just start with the obvious. Our title characters, Peter Pan, Wendy. Peter in the original is dynamic and exciting and bombastic. A really great performance by his voice actor to create one of Disney's most iconic characters. You understand why the Lost Boys follow him. You understand why the Darlings abandon their family to go on an adventure with this dude. You completely get why Tiger Lily, Wendy, the mermaids, and Tinkerbell are also enamored with him. And then you get to the live action version and woohoo! I have not seen a performance quite this bad, perhaps ever. And like, I don't want to just spend my time hating on child or teen actors, but this performance is bad. Truly dreadful. There's no life, no excitement, no chemistry with any of the other actors, lines delivered poorly, so either this kid is the worst actor ever, the script is the worst ever, or the director really just dropped the ball in every way. Maybe it's a little bit of everything. Either way, I just don't think this poor dude should ever have been cast. It's the epitome of the "we have that at home" meme. Mom, can we get some Peter Pan? No, we have Peter Pan at home. And there it is. And honestly, I don't even know if the writing for him was actually good or not. I don't know. I doubt it was, but the performance was so terrible that I had to zone out whenever he spoke. Although that being said, there were some things I noticed. Most specifically, a really weird change to his character, to make him just the worst dude. As a kid, James, aka Captain Hook, came to Neverland and lived with Peter as the first of his lost boys, before being banished for missing his mum. Whew. And then since life is hard, he ends up as a pirate and comes back for revenge. And Peter's just unrepentant throughout the entire film until right at the very end. And even then, it doesn't really solve anything. I get wanting to add depth, but he just comes off as a major prick throughout the entire film. And since the actor's not really talented enough to show off that childish aspect of Peter, it just all falls flat. So yeah, Pete, he just ain't it for this film. And so then this brings us to Wendy. In the original film, she's pretty much a non-entity. I mean, she's there, but she's just a cheerleader for the heroic boys to fight the nasty pirates. Here, they change that up, and they give her a little bit more to do, and that's fine. Honestly, she is one of the better parts of the film. The actress was decent, the character was decent, the only problem is, felt like it all came at the expense of every other character, literally every single one. She absorbed all the action hero for herself, and left just enough for Peter to tide himself over and have something for him to do at the end. But ultimately, this leaves John, Michael, and the Lost Kids as complete and utter bystanders who really do almost nothing. Over the course of the film, in every confrontation, they're kind of just there. And so, I guess that's not really a critique of Wendy, just the writing in general. It's uneven, and it leaves a whole lot of pointless wallflower characters that add very little to the film at large. They're just there. Bodies. But on top of that, her arc does get a bit lost along the way. At the start of the film, she doesn't want to grow up. And then suddenly, one cannon blast later, and she's ready to grow up and be an adult. And it's all a bit sudden, and it's not really talked about. And so I think this is where they need to flesh out that transition, but they don't. So it just doesn't work very well. And so you're left with these things. A protagonist who is a vacuum of charisma, actively making the film unwatchable when he's the focus. And we have another protagonist who's the only character who really does anything throughout the course of the film. All the side characters are non-entities. And then we have our main antagonist. Jude Law. I guess he did what he could with this script, but my god, it feels like he was phoning this one in. And honestly, I don't really blame him, but then again, he probably got a hefty paycheck doing this film, so be better, mate. God damn. Be better. I realise it's not high cinema, but at your going rate, you should at least try. Plus, in terms of the writing, they do this weird, half-assed effort to humanise Captain Hook and give him some backstory as a former lost boy, when all you need is for him to be a pirate. That's really all you need. He needed money, so he became a pirate. Look at any pirate's Wikipedia. Any prominent pirate. They just become pirates. He then became a captain, and since pirates usually have to be pretty lacking in the morality department, after all it does come with the territory, he ends up being a bit of a bad dude. And so in the end, I just feel like they needlessly muddied the water and distracted from the story with a half-assed attempt at sympathy and depth. They just add a little bit of a sob story right at the end to try and make you sympathize. And I just don't think it works. And plus, the crocodile, one of the most iconic parts of his character, just ups and disappears after Skull Rock. It's very important to his arc, and it's hardly used at all. It ambushes them, they briefly refer to his hatred of clocks, and that's really it. Just feels like wasted potential. And on top of that, sadly, we also have Tiger Lily. The Native Americans were walking stereotypes in the original film. Very racist. Here, it feels like they wanted to redeem that and say, oh no, we're not racist anymore. But then along the way, they kind of forgot to make her important or relevant at all. She turns up like twice, fights some pirates and leaves. There's no arc, no journey, no nothing. And so at that point, just cut out the character, Disney. Yikes. And Tinkerbell, oh my god, Tinkerbell, reduced to a nothing of a character. None of the charm, none of the sass, devoid of any personality, with a weird stop-start story that doesn't matter at all in the end. One of the most iconic characters in Disney history, Tinkerbell the fairy, completely butchered by this film. Doesn't even make sense why she'd want to stick with this version of Peter in the first place. But that's all just characters. There is much worse. The story itself is nothing to write home about. It's not bad, but it's just, it's the tried and tested method for these live action remakes, isn't it? How about we use the same plot, but we make it worse? And that's all there is to it. It just feels like it takes forever to get going, and takes you forever to get to Neverland. And when you're there, it still feels plotting. Like nothing happens. And then you look at the runtime and you can see why it feels that way. The original goes for 77 minutes. This film goes for 109 minutes. 30 minutes of extra bloat that did not need to be there. 30 minutes that added nothing and didn't contribute to the enjoyment of the film whatsoever. Not every film has to be an epic saga that goes on and on. Sometimes, less is more. I think in all honesty, the maximum that it should have been would be 90 minutes. From the original 77 minutes, you shave off a few of the racist bits and you dedicate some time to fleshing out Wendy, as after all, you're propping her up as an equal half, so you have to flesh out her character and her relationship with Peter, their opposing viewpoints, add some action sequences, dedicate time for some side characters. You can do all that in 90 minutes, I promise. But then they just go even further. They go for the additional 20 minutes on top of that 90-minute limit, and somehow they manage to achieve almost none of the things that needed to be achieved. So basically we have the original, minus the racism and the sexism, but with worse acting and more bloat where not much happens, and nothing grips you. I mean, for God's sake, did we need 2 bad pirate sea shanties? I don't think we did. And I guess that leads us into the soundtrack now. The original, it had some classics. You Can Fly, Following the Leader, Second Star to the Right, and obviously there's some songs, like What Makes the Red Man Red, that should be lost to time. But instead of just cutting out that really racist song, they sort of just cut all the songs. They had You Can Fly / Second Star to the Right as an orchestral piece, and I'm sure some of the others might have appeared. But as an orchestral, they just don't feel quite as magical. It's like in Mulan. It didn't work as well without the songs. You lose that magic, and really, I think that's one of the big problems of the film. It is devoid of magic and charm. It's lifeless. It's dull. The characters don't stand out. Peter, the lost kids, they're all so generic. I get you don't want the optics of them wearing animal furs, but come on, be better than that. On top of that, Captain Hook, the original, so opulent, so grand, so pompous, and yet here so gritty and gross. That's not what was needed for the character. Neverland, it's a land of magic and wonder, an escape for children. They shouldn't be gritty pirates. They should be fantastical pirates. Kids would imagine them as grand and exciting, not Pirates of the Caribbean light. On top of that, they mostly cut out the mermaids, and then they have the native people. And like I said, they had them literally there to try and make the company seem less racist, but they just have them there as a token thing. They don't use them at all. It's just a dead story. On top of that, the Lost Boys look like homeless children, and I suppose they really just are homeless children. But still, it's less fantastical. And Neverland itself, the design, it's mostly just open plains. No trees, no nothing. It's just so dull. So much for the land of imagination. And so yeah, I gotta tell you, this film legit sucks. I really rarely take such a hard stance on things, but I regret watching it. I regretted it before they even got out of the nursery to go to Neverland. Also, just side note, what the hell? Why'd they completely skip over Mr. Darling and Nana? Some of the best parts of the original, and they just hardly exist in this film at all. What's going on? And on top of that, Wendy getting angsty with Mrs. Darling of all people, the nicest character in Disney history. I don't know what they're thinking. The writing, the acting, the directing, the music, the design, every aspect of this film comes in under expectations. And for me, it's a miserable experience and my most hated Disney live action remake yet. At this stage, how low can Disney sink? How can they release this for public consumption? Ugh, I'm just so upset. And so, I think I'll end it here. So with all that being said, these are just my opinions. Now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the film? Do you agree with me that it sucks? Or are you going to be objectively wrong and say that it's good? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know.